To everyone else, she was single. To me, she was my faithful wife. I remember the first time I noticed just a flicker of movement as Emily slipped her wedding band into the pocket of her leather jacket before walking out the door. At first, I laughed it off. She must have been trying to avoid scratching the ring against the car door. But then it happened again and again, always on nights she told me she'd be out with the girls or grabbing coffee with her coworker, Sarah. I trusted her completely. I'd seen her at her worst, the tears in her eyes when I'd lost my job, the half-smile she mustered when I took her to the airport after her mom's surgery. I believed in us. It started with small doubts, tiny ripples in my confidence. I'd get home early from work and her car would be gone, yet the door wouldn't click shut behind me. I'd wander through our living room, illuminated by the blue glow of the TV she'd promised she'd turn off. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table, screen dark. I wanted to believe she was just downstairs grabbing milk or taking a walk to clear her head. But then one evening, driven by a curiosity I couldn't quell, I tapped into our home surveillance system, installed for peace of mind, she'd said. What I saw on that grainy moonlit footage wrecked me. Emily pulled into the driveway at 11 sharp, phone pressed to her ear, whispering so I wouldn't overhear. She hesitated for a moment, staring up at our house before slipping off her ring. My pulse raced as she tucked it under her pillow, tossed her jacket onto the back seat, and then climbed into a silver sedan I didn't recognize. It pulled away within seconds. Over the next week, I watched obsessively. Late nights, early mornings, any window of time I could scrape together between shifts at the hardware store and trying to sleep. Each clip felt like a fresh betrayal. The ring discarded in her purse as she sat next to a man whose arm around her waist was as familiar as mine used to be. His laugh, his hand guiding her through the dance of dark parking garages and empty beer gardens, they were the soundtrack to a life I thought was ours alone. I confronted her once. I caught her red-handed, stepping into that same sedan. Heart hammering, I swiped at the screen with my finger, pausing on her face as she looked back, startled. She dropped her phone, stared at me, eyes wide. "Jake, what are you doing?" she hissed, voice trembling. I wanted to scream, to ask why, to tell her I loved her more than anyone ever. But I just whispered, "Who is that?" My voice cracked. She crouched down to pick up her phone, pressed play on the footage. The man slid a quick kiss to her cheek as she smiled at him, so different from the way she used to smile at me. That night, she spun a story of late projects, stress that made her forget her ring. She swore it was a colleague, harmless, no strings attached. I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But every fiber of my being knew something had changed. Every night alone, yawning to fill a half-empty bed, I counted the seconds until sunrise. I started to retrace her steps, text messages that popped up and vanished within minutes, map pins that showed nothing. I tried to catch her off guard. "I got off early tonight, want to order Thai?" But she'd claim a last-minute meeting, family stuff. On weekends, when she used to drag me hiking or to the flea market downtown, she now had plans with her friend who lived 2 hours away. It was exhausting, slaughtering hope bit by bit. Late one Saturday, my heart sank when the surveillance pinged at exactly 9. Her usual check-in call never came. Instead, I found footage of her sitting across from that same man at some dimly lit diner, their heads bent together, the ring conspicuously gone. He reached across the table, folded her hands in his, and she looked at him, as if she was making a choice. I felt like my world had fractured. Every promise, every milestone, from our wedding vows in that little chapel overlooking the coast to the apartment we'd scraped together months before, was now tainted, recast in the flicker of a security camera. My friends told me to leave, to get out while I still could. My mother called daily, soothing her worries with what-ifs and should-haves. I wore a mask for everyone else, pretending I was fine. But in those dark hours, all I could hear was the echo of Emily's laughter, not for me anymore. To tell this story in full means weaving through months of stolen moments and broken trusts. I've watched her drape herself in lies, and I've tracked every remove and return of that ring like a ritual of deceit. Now, I'm at a crossroads. Expose everything and risk becoming a petty ex, or gather the courage to face her in the light, no cameras, no rewinds, just the raw truth. Because real faithfulness doesn't hide in the shadows. It stands bold, ring or no ring, eyes open, heart exposed. I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, replaying every detail I'd seen on those night vision clips. The way Emily's hand brushed his as they unpacked takeout, the soft glance she gave him before leaning in. I couldn't tell which hurt more, the fact that she'd done it, or that I'd been so blind. The ring itself had become a talisman of our marriage, and now it was a symbol of her disappearing. Morning light found me scrolling through her phone records. Timestamps, unknown numbers, the same pattern. A quick ping at 10, a 7-minute call at midnight, a data spike at 3 in the morning. I memorized every timestamp like a litany. I wanted to feel something besides betrayal, anger, sorrow, righteous indignation, but I was numb. I started my day off by heading to her favorite coffee shop. I sat at a corner table where I knew she'd go, 2 seats from the window so I could watch the door. When she walked in, she smiled at me, bright, casual, like she hadn't torn me apart in my own living room. She sat, ordered her vanilla latte with extra foam, and pulled out her laptop. My heart thudded. I stood, cleared my throat. "Mind if I join you?" She looked up, startled. "Jake? What are you doing here?" I slid into the chair. "I'm tired of guarding my emotions at home. I'd rather get answers now." Emily blinked. She dropped her posture from carefree to defensive, crossing her arms. "What answers?" I unfolded my list. "Who is he? Why are you lying about late nights? Why?" I stopped myself. I wanted her to admit everything on her own. I leaned forward. "Why won't you just tell me the truth?" Her jaw clenched. She ran a hand through her hair. She sighed, glanced at the door, then back at me. "He's someone I met at work. His name's Carter. It started months ago." My chest constricted. Months ago? I pictured our wedding pictures, the handful of months since our honeymoon, and realized she'd been seeing Carter on our anniversary week. "You've been with him since March?" She bit her lip, nodded. "It just happened. One thing led to another." "Why?" The word caught in my throat. Emily closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, then said, "I felt lonely. You were working so much, always exhausted. I didn't know how to reach you anymore, and Carter, he made me feel needed." My hands shook. I wanted to ask, "How could you lie? How could you hide the ring?" But instead I asked, "Do you love him?" Her eyes filled. She said, "I don't know. I love you. I did. But I don't know who I am anymore." I left without another word, spilling my coffee on the way out. The stain was dark on the pavement, like how I felt. Over the next weeks I slipped back into surveillance mode, but with a new strategy. I'd record every meeting, every kiss, all proof I needed. I rented a cheap dash cam, parked near the coffee shop and the diner, traced their dinners, their late shows at that jazz bar she'd never bring me to. I cataloged every clip in folders labeled April, May, June. Each folder was a confession in itself. At night, I'd sit on the couch, watching the files back to back. I wore the same jeans and t-shirt so no one else could track my fatigue, like a uniform of sorrow, and pressed play. In one video, Carter slipped his hand along her thigh as she laughed. In another, they kissed under neon lights outside a 24-hour gym lot. Every moment felt like a razor carving away at my confidence. I knew I needed to make a choice. Forgive and try to rebuild, or cut all ties and start over alone. But I also knew her apology, her tears, her promises of it'll never happen again were only words. I wanted more. Proof that she was actually willing to fight for us. So I emailed her a proposal, get outside help, a counselor, something official. I told her I couldn't believe her again without some accountability. She wrote back in an hour, yes. She said she was sorry, that she still wanted a future with me. I found a couples therapist in town, someone with good reviews, someone who specialized in infidelity. We scheduled our first session 2 days out, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. I chose an early slot, hoping to get it over with before the dread set in. Tonight, I'll drive us there in silence, ring on her finger or off. I'll sit across from her, my Emily, and I'll watch her face in the dim light of that office. I'll see if the apology matches the eyes. At home, I've moved the ring's display box onto my nightstand. Some nights I cradle it in my palm, feeling the cool metal. It doesn't hurt anymore. It weighs like a reminder. Love can be taken off as easily as it's put on. But maybe if we both want it, we can learn to put it back. Or maybe it'll stay on the shelf, a relic of a promise that wasn't enough to stop her from leaving my shadow behind. I don't know how this ends, But tomorrow, when we sit face to face in that therapy room, I'll have to decide if faithfulness is something we rebuild, ring or no ring, or if it's something that, once broken, can never truly be whole again. That Thursday, the sky was the color of bruised plums as we pulled into the parking lot. Emily's hand hovered near the center console, then withdrew. I waited, heart pounding, staring straight ahead at the sliding glass door of the counseling office. Inside, the familiar snake plant in the corner, the muted painting of an autumn forest, symbols of calm I didn't feel. We sat in mismatched chairs facing Dr. Patel, whose soft-spoken voice sounded like a lifeline. "Thank you both for coming," she said. "Let's start with what brought you here." Emily's fingers twined in her lap. I gripped the armrests as if they could anchor me. She spoke first. "I betrayed Jake," she said. Her eyes brimmed. "I'm so sorry. I felt neglected, and Carter made me feel seen." Each word landed like a stone in my chest. I remembered nights when I'd come home late and she'd pretended to sleep, nights I'd asked if she was okay and she'd said, "Fine." All the times I mistook quiet anger for peace. Dr. Patel nodded and turned to me. "Jake, what would you like to share?" I swallowed, vision narrowing. I watched her cheat. "I have video. I can't trust anything she says." My voice cracked. Everything I'd stored, the videos, timestamps, Carter's name, flooded back. I watched my own anger soften into exhaustion. I don't know how to believe in her again. Emily's sobs filled the silence. She looked at me, bare. "I want to earn your trust," she cried. "I'll do anything." Dr. Patel interjected gently. "Trust isn't automatic, it's built. Jake, what would you need to feel safe?" The question echoed in the room. I thought of the ring, the camera, the endless nights of doubt. "Honesty," I said. "Transparency. If you want forgiveness, I need to know I'm not chasing shadows." Emily nodded fiercely. "I'll give you my phone. All passwords. I'll check in at night. No secrets." We spent the next hour mapping out a plan. Weekly check-ins, open calendars, trust tokens, where she'd text me photos when she left work, and I'd text back. It felt clinical, but I craved structure. Therapy ended with homework, an apology letter from Emily, and a journal entry from me exploring my anger. Driving home, the bruise-colored sky had shifted to indigo. Emily reached for my hand. It felt like the first time in months. I didn't yank away. We sat in silence, the new rules suspended between us. That night, I opened her apology letter in the dim light of our bedroom. Her handwriting slanted upward, hesitant. She wrote of emptiness, of guilt, of gratitude that I still held on. My chest ached reading it. Her words were sincere. But ink can't bind a broken heart. I pulled out my journal. The blank page stared back. I wrote, clumsy at first, "I feel betrayed. I feel lost." Then I paused, remembered how she cradled my face when my dad died, how she laughed when I tried to dance in the kitchen. "I feel scared that love can't survive this." Days turned into a routine of cautious hope. Emily texted her trust tokens, snapshots of her desk lamp turning off, her feet outside the gym, the book she was reading. I replied with a quick heart emoji each time. They felt silly, symbols in place of real intimacy, but they were progress. One evening, she surprised me with dinner at home, spaghetti carbonara, my favorite. She'd bought fresh basil, grated the Parmesan herself. We ate by lamplight, no TV, no phones. I watched her laugh at a joke I told, the way her nose crinkled. It was like glimpsing her soul through a keyhole. Still, doubt lingered. Every dinner felt like a test. Every text waited for a hidden meaning. When she asked, "How was your day?" I sometimes snapped as if she'd lulled me into safety only to betray me again. She'd flinch, but never give up. 3 weeks after therapy, we returned to Dr. Patel. The trust log showed 70 texts, 30 check-ins, 0 slip-ups. Progress, Dr. Patel smiled, but she noted my guarded gaze. "Jake, how does this feel?" I admitted. "Better, but I'm exhausted. I can't keep score forever." Dr. Patel suggested we phase out the tokens gradually, replace them with shared activities, cooking together, weekend walks, honest conversations. "Trust should become second nature," she said. On the drive home, I realized I was finally smiling when Emily reached for my hand. It wasn't fear or testing. It was genuine. That night, I didn't watch the surveillance footage. I left the files alone. Instead, I climbed into bed and watched Emily, ring on her finger, breathing softly beside me. I touched the metal. It was warm. It felt hopeful, not haunted. I don't know where we go from here. Repairing love takes time, sometimes more than I have. But in the darkness, I no longer feel alone. And maybe that's the first step toward something real. Two people learning to rebuild what they once broke together. A month into our new routine, I found myself waking before my alarm, curious rather than anxious. It was strange. This yearning for normalcy felt almost foreign. I'd begun to drift through our mornings like a ghost, clutching the ring in my pocket, bracing for another disappearance. But now, Emily's head lay against my shoulder as the sunrise filtered through the blinds, and I didn't flinch. I breathed in the scent of her shampoo, let the warmth of her arm around me settle in. Still, old habits die hard. That Tuesday on my lunch break at the hardware store, I felt a pang when my phone buzzed with her token. A photo of her locker at the gym, closed, keys in hand. I stared at that image for a moment longer than usual, as though searching for proof of honesty, and realized it no longer enraged me, just reminded me that she existed somewhere outside of my suffocating doubt. That evening, back home, I flicked off the kitchen lights before she did. We stood in semi-darkness, cooking our stir-fry, her chopping carrots, me handling the wok. No cameras, no logs. I glanced at her, and she caught my eye. She smiled, a small, imperfect curve, and said, "Thank you for trusting me." It felt good to be thanked for something I'd feared I would never do, to let go of the ledger of lies. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but my heart fluttered. "Guess I'm learning," I said. A week later, Carter reappeared on her social media feed, tagged in a photo at some art opening downtown. Emily had joined him for a group event. She'd told me it was a work party. I hadn't thought to check her stories before. Now his face stared back at me on my screen, laughing, arms slung around her shoulders. My gut tightened so sharply I nearly dropped my phone. I closed the feed. In the glow of my screen, I wondered if I'd ever stop noticing him. It wasn't just about her fidelity anymore. It was a specter of doubt that haunted everything. That night, I laid awake replaying our therapy goals. Transparency, honesty, shared experiences. We'd begun trying new things, dance classes at the community center, hiking trails we'd never had time for before. Each activity felt like another bridge toward a new foundation, albeit a shaky one. Still, when I got out of bed the next morning, I texted Emily before she left for work. "Saw Carter on Insta. Was it a work event or?" My words hung between us. I hit send, bracing for tension. Within minutes, she replied. "It was group outing. I forgot to mention, the gallery had free drinks and my friend invited me. That's it. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." I exhaled. Part of me wanted to push back, demand proof, but another, quieter part, the part I was trying to cultivate, softened. "Okay," I wrote. "Thanks for clarifying. I trust you." The rest of the day passed in relative peace. But that night, as I drifted off, I realized I still cared enough to feel the sting. Trust wasn't about erasing every doubt. It was about choosing to believe, moment by moment, even with scars. A few days later, Emily surprised me with tickets to see a show at the local improv theater, something spontaneous, not on our calendar. We laughed until our bellies ached. When the lights came up, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "I love you," she whispered. I felt my chest tighten, not with suspicion, but with something close to relief. On the drive home, we talked about the future. Maybe moving to a new neighborhood, finally rescuing that dog we'd talked about last year. I felt a tremor of excitement, like hope was seeping back in. But then came Thursday. I sat at work, running through orders, my phone silent, no token, no "I'm on my way" text. By 6, I was sweating. My shift ended, and I rushed to my car, dialing her number as I fumbled with the key. It went straight to voicemail. My breath hitched, old panic surged. Had something happened? Was she avoiding me? I sped home, every red light a prison sentence. When I pulled into the driveway, the lights were off. I called out her name. No answer. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, heart pounding so loud I heard it in my ears. Inside, our kitchen was dark, countertops wiped clean. I flicked on the lights. She wasn't there. I checked the living room, blank. I stumbled upstairs past our bedroom door and nearly had a heart attack when I saw her silhouette at the bathroom sink. She was brushing her teeth, humming softly to herself. I stood frozen in the hallway. My chest hurt with relief and shame. She turned, toothbrush in mouth, toothpaste foam dripping. "Jake," she said, startled. She spit, rinsed, then set down her toothbrush. "What's wrong?" I ran up the stairs 2 at a time. She dropped the toothbrush. "I didn't get a token," I blurted. I thought you were lying again." Her eyes filled with tears of frustration. She stepped closer. "I forgot. I'm sorry. I've been swamped at work and I fell asleep early. I didn't mean to scare you." Anger and guilt warred inside me. I pressed my hands to my temples. I thought you left me." She reached out, cupped my face. "I'm right here. I've never wanted to leave you." I closed my eyes, let the tension melt into her touch. I realized then I would always be tempted to doubt, but not everything that scares me means betrayal. Sometimes it's simply fear looking for proof. We stayed in that hallway for a long moment, two imperfect people learning to forgive the past while trusting each other again. I didn't ask for footage, passwords, or tokens. I just stared into her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry for doubting you." She kissed my forehead, and for the first time in months, I didn't think about Carter, the surveillance, or the ring. I thought only of her, standing beside me in the dim light, both of us raw, afraid, and still holding on. And that, I realized, might be enough. The next morning I woke before my alarm again, this time with a strange lightness in my chest instead of the usual dread. Emily was already gone, her side of the bed neatly made, her coffee mug on the nightstand with a little lipstick stain still clinging to the rim. I traced that stain with my fingertip and felt a flutter of something like hope. I dressed in silence, no glances at my phone, no urge to check footage. At the kitchen table, I flipped open my laptop to write a few lines in my journal, a ritual Dr. Patel suggested whenever I felt overwhelmed. I wrote, "Woke up today, without panic, saw her mug and smiled." And then I closed it, sliding it back into its drawer. Emily walked in, hair in a messy bun, still wearing her running tights and a hoodie. She smelled like lavender and sweat. She paused in the doorway, watching me with a small, tentative smile, like she was waiting to see if I'd jump up and demand an explanation for something trivial. Instead, I stood and wrapped my arms around her. "Good morning," I whispered into her hair. She sighed, a sound of relief I could almost taste. "Morning. Run was great. Felt like I actually moved my body for once." I let go and pulled out a chair. "Make yourself coffee," I said. "I've got breakfast covered." She cocked an eyebrow. "You cook?" "Got a mean omelet in me today," I replied with a grin that felt surprisingly real. We moved around each other in the kitchen, bantering over salt and pepper like two strangers learning each other's rhythms for the first time. When the omelettes were done, we ate over our open windows, listening to distant traffic and birds that sounded unsure about spring. It was ordinary, and that ordinariness felt nothing less than miraculous. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking past our bedroom mirror. For months, I'd avoided seeing my own reflection too clearly, afraid I would recognize only the haunted guy in those dark circles. Today, I squared my shoulders and looked myself in the eye. There was fatigue in my gaze, yes, but also a spark I hadn't felt since before Emily and I said I do. I thought about the ring, tucked safely in my pocket. I let my thumb brush its edge. It no longer weighed me down. Instead, it reminded me that promises could be fractured but also reforged, if both people were willing. That evening, instead of planning another trust token, I surprised Emily. I invited her to a pottery class I signed us up for, no strings attached, just 2 tickets for Tuesday at 6. She eyed me warily at first, but then her face lit up like she remembered I could be spontaneous. "I'm in," she said, and the word was a small but powerful gesture of faith. On the drive there, we listened to a podcast about relationships recovering after betrayal. We laughed at the host's awkward metaphors. Marriage is like a tandem bike. You both have to pedal, or you crash. By the time we pulled into the Pottery Studios lot, I felt like we'd already pedaled a mile. We worked with clay under soft yellow lights, shaping imperfect mugs that looked nothing like the elegant pieces we saw on Instagram. My hands were clumsy, hers smoother, more confident. At one point, as we tried to negotiate a shared wheel, our elbows bumped and clay splattered onto the floor. We both paused, faces blank, then burst into laughter. It was the kind of laughter that clears the air, that reminds you how good it feels to be alive in someone's company. By the time we left, holding our lumpy, half-finished creations wrapped in towels, I realized something. Our relationship wasn't a flawless sculpture. It was a collaboration, messy and in progress, something we would shape together day by day. That night, back at home, we set our mugs on the coffee table and sat close enough that our knees touched. I caught her looking at me and held her gaze. "Thank you," I said softly. "For staying." She blinked, tenderness in her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me again." I smiled, leaning in to kiss her. It was gentle, no rush, no ghosts from the past hovering over us, just two people making up their minds to try again. I don't know what the future holds. There will be moments when doubt creeps back in, when old fears rise like unwelcome visitors. But tonight, as I drift off to sleep next to Emily, I believe we can navigate those dark corners together. Maybe trust isn't something you achieve once and for all. Maybe it's a practice, a choice you renew each day. And tomorrow I'll choose it again. Ring on my finger or off, cameras asleep, hearts wide open. That night, after our clay mugs dried and we'd collapsed onto the couch with takeout sushi, I realized how far we'd come. The threat of Carter, once a specter haunting every moment, had faded into a footnote, a memory that no longer dictated our days. Emily leaned against me, her cheek warm against my shoulder, and I felt a quiet swell of gratitude, not just for her willingness to fight for us, but for myself, for finding the strength to trust again. The following weekend, I surprised her with a drive out to the coast. We'd honeymooned in a little beach town 2 years ago, and I thought returning there might help seal what we'd rebuilt. The car wound through pine forests and rolling hills until we crested a bluff overlooking the ocean, sky streaked with sunset pinks and purples. I parked, and we climbed down the rocky path to the shore. Sand sifted between my toes as we walked hand in hand, the ring on my finger catching the last light. I remembered how I'd once watched Emily slip it off, hide it, discard it, and how I'd cataloged every betrayal in cold files named for months and dates. But here, with the salt breeze on my face and the steady rhythm of waves, I felt those old files dissolve. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it turned the pages forward. We found an abandoned driftwood stump to sit on. Emily curled against me, her hair tangled by the wind. I pulled out the little box I'd kept in my jacket pocket, a simple wooden case I'd carved my initials into before she ever met Carter. I opened it to show her the ring, its gold band dulled by salt spray. She reached out, her fingers grazing mine. "I want you to have this," I said, and the words were heavier than any confession. "It's ours, again, if you still want it." Her eyes glistened. "I've never wanted it more," she whispered. She reached in, slipped it back on my finger, then uncoiled her own hand from mine and slid it onto hers. They fit together again, imperfect but real. We sat like that for a long moment, watching the sun melt into the horizon. No cameras, no tokens, no therapy homework. Just two people who had chosen to face the worst and found something worth saving. On the drive home, Emily put her head on my shoulder and said, "Thank you for holding on." I kissed her temple. "Thank you for coming back." In the weeks that followed, we didn't abandon every safeguard. Our therapist encouraged continued check-ins, and we honored them, not out of fear, but respect for the journey we'd shared. We enrolled in a cooking class instead of more pottery, joined a weekend hiking club, and started planning our first anniversary party at the house where I first installed those cameras. This time, we'd invite friends not to watch us, but to celebrate us. One evening, as we hung fairy lights in the backyard, I caught Emily watching me. The string of lights tangled in her hands, she paused and smiled, a soft, genuine curve of lips that felt like home. I dropped my end of the string, walked over, and brushed a strand of hair from her eyes. She laughed. "You're getting sap on me." "You're worth it," I said, and the world felt steady beneath my feet. Standing there with the lingering hum of cicadas around us, I understood that love isn't a possession you lock away or a ledger you balance. It's a living thing, vulnerable and wild, needing care and courage to thrive. We'd weathered the storm of betrayal, but the real test was what came after. The willingness to build something new, stronger for its cracks. Tonight, I'll climb into bed alongside Emily, and I'll rest easy knowing our story doesn't end with the next sunrise or the next fear. It continues in every shared laugh, every unguarded glance, and every promise we choose to keep. Not because of a ring, a camera, or a therapist's plan, but because we believe in each other again. And that, more than anything, feels like coming home.